Good evening. Welcome to MAP. How many of you are here for the first time? Oh my God. Thank you. I have to thank S.J. Vasudev for getting new people into the museum. So those, how many of you know about MAP? Everybody, even those who haven't been to MAP. Great. So just in any case, we opened our doors about 2 years ago. The mic's not working? Okay, clearly this was designed before I started this job. So we opened about 2 years ago, February of last year is when we opened the museum. And since then, of course, we've had many exhibitions and events. But one of the key principles behind anything we do is to provoke curiosity in everybody who comes. So every exhibition, every event, what we want to do is to get people to think a bit, be curious about the event, the activity, the people, all of that, so that you leave from here learning a little bit in a fun, engaging way. So it is but natural that we have a collaboration with Ananya Drisha, talking about written and dance, because dance is one of those things that children do from when they're 6 months old. And I think somebody famous said that dance is the soul of every human being. So dance sort of is the core of everything that we do, and I think we all have seen what dance can do. So for us, this talk today about how dance provokes inspiration across various fields of art seems an interesting conversation for us to have. And the partnership with Ananya Drisha also seems natural. Ananya Drisha, as you know, is an artist-led initiative. They have talks between artists across multiple fields to understand how these fields come together and create something new, dramatic, and interesting to sort of feed our souls. We just concluded our annual festival called Art is Life, because we strongly believe that art fills life, and a life without art is sort of a little less than what it should be. So I don't want to talk too much. There's a video that on Ananya Drisha, which we will show. After that, I'll invite Mr. Vasudev to come up and introduce Shoba Narayan and Madhu Nataraj, and then the conversation will begin. So can we play the video, please?
for the map to get the artist. I do not know how to do it, but anyway, we will try our best. And so far, you have seen the video which was shown now, and we have been continuously doing work with the artist community, particularly painters, sculptors, and graphic artists. For the first time, when Abhishek, my friend Abhishek Padar, called me a few months ago and said, what about Ananya Drishya at MAP? So we thought of having, immediately I thought of having our friend Madhu Nataraj, who was supposed to come and do the program at National Gallery of Modern Art some years ago, about 2 years ago. And National Gallery of Modern Art at that time, they said that it is only for painters and sculptors and not for other arts. So I was a bit disappointed because I personally feel that it's important for all of us to be together, all the arts. And I'm very happy that MAP has organized this program. And today we are having a very famous dancer, Madhu Nataraj, and equally famous moderator, Shoba Narayan. Shoba Narayan, I know her as a writer, and she had written on me in one of my exhibitions some years ago. And I'm very happy about it, and then we'll see what the conversation is going to be about art and music, art and dance. We would like to start this program and then have later on literature, poetry, and other forms of art. Thank you very much.
artists break out of that. And I do believe that collaboration and community these are the two words that are going to define us in the coming decade. There is an epidemic of loneliness in America. It can't be too far before it spreads to other cultures. So Madhu and Natya have collaborated across spaces, across genres, across skill sets, across art forms, and the same with Mr. Vasudev, which I discovered. He has done book covers for Mr. Ananthamurthy's books. He has designed movie. He has worked with theatre. So I am so thrilled to be moderating this conversation that brings forth this collaboration between the arts. So how do you measure the worth of an artist? I mean, market forces demand that you measure it in money. But I would argue that ancient civilizations such as India show us a different light by which we can measure art. And I think if you go back in time to Rome, Greece, Egypt, artists were conscience keepers, aesthetes. But they were also, like Harish said, they were questioners, they invoked curiosity. They stood in the crossroads of multiple disciplines. So that is the thrust of this conversation and the questions I will be asking Madhu. As a writer, I think the three things that enhance my field would be curiosity, vocabulary, and a certain amount of vulnerability. This is what draws you to a work of literature. So Madhu, I would like to start with vocabulary, because painting has a vocabulary, art has a vocabulary, dance has a vocabulary, and certainly writing has a vocabulary. So how did you evolve the vocabulary of this new institute that you created when you moved here for the first time?
Thank you, Shoba. Namaskar, everybody. Welcome back to this conversation. And Vasuji, always an honor and a delight to collaborate with you in any manner. So, Shoba, you're absolutely right. You know, this search for the vocabulary. I have studied, as you know, Kathak from my mother, Guru Maya Rao. And Harish was saying that you know, from 6 months onwards, we start to dance. But I think for me, dance is a womb memory. And I think we start dancing in our mother's womb. So it's an inherent act of nature. So I was studying Kathak. I studied Kathak, and then I went away to New York to study contemporary dance. And while there, I missed both the fragrance and stench of India. And I had an opportunity to stay back at the Martha Graham Center and for 5 years and then come back. But I felt I don't want to come back and dance like a contemporary American dancer. And there are certain body types that suit certain techniques. So I came back and really revisited all our movement disciplines in a country which has over 8 classical forms, about 500 known ritualistic and folk forms, and about 6 existing martial art traditions. Where are we short of inspiration? So I revisited our Indian martial art forms. In fact, started the first few classes for Kalaripayattu here in Bangalore way back in 1994. Started the STEM dance company in 95, revisited Hatha Yoga, Kathak, and started to create a vocabulary. So we had to visit the Laban techniques or, you know, pranic healing, other methodologies in order to even develop a regimen that the dancers practice. Shoba, it was a very difficult journey because I was initially ostracized, saying, why is a good Kathak dancer standing on her head or talking about sexuality or depression for that matter? But I belonged to this time, and that was a reality. And the invitations would come home for my mother and not for me, for most places. But once we started, the audiences of Bangalore are both discerning and accepting, and that gave us the fuel to continue. So in answer to your question, definitely it was revisiting and with new eyes looking at our own movement disciplines. And two, as I have always said, my style has always been, the signature is collaboration. Even as a 24-year-old starting in Bangalore's first contemporary Indian dance company, because there were soloists who used to be there. It has, from the first performance of ours, we had the audacity to like hire Chaudhaya and ticket it in 1995, and had about 8 collaborators. We had a sculptor, we had Sridevi Deshpande here sitting, who did the costumes, for lighting, for various other things. So also the text. Literature has played a very, very important part in all our work across time. So that's how it developed. It's as Vasuji said, no art exists in isolation, and definitely not so for a spatio-temporal form like dance.
Talk to me about, earlier by phone we had talked about Kalpa-Vriksha, one of the dance forms you created, and you said it was inspired by him. So let's talk about that. And also how he was inspired by literature.
Yes. So Vasuji, again, like you were a young college student when you met him. So for me, my parents were good friends with their family and all of that. But I first encountered him as a professional when I was 23. I had just started choreographing and we're doing some side gigs to make some pocket money. And there was a women's organization in Bangalore. And I think it was Sangeeta Jindal and others who wanted me to choreograph something on them. They were all either homemakers or people working in the corporate field, but had never danced professionally. And they said, shall we approach S.G. Vasudevji? And he has agreed very kindly to give us his work. And that's when I first encountered the Vriksha concept that is there in his work, and the constant presence of this correlation and the syncretic relationship of humankind and nature. And we did this series called She-Scapes and he was, he was kind enough. I mean, here is this well-known artist. I'm a 23-year-old new kid on the block, but he was very kind. And he kept saying every year that we must collaborate again. And I think almost 20 years later, he called me to NGMA and said, Madhu, NGMA is going to do my retrospective across India. And will you choreograph? And he said, where shall we do it? Yelmadana. And we were sitting at the cafe. And I said, definitely not in the auditorium. Let's do it here, Vasuji. He said, here? I said, yes. If you see over here, it's the cafe space. There are 2 beautiful trees, which is a banyan tree and a peepal tree, which we use. We later realized that I think in many traditions, they are considered also as male and female, and they get married. And we also chose, for the second part of the series, Rhapsody, asked NGMA for the first and last time, I think that happened, thanks to him, where the dancers also enter the water body, not just dance over it. We will see a clip of that later. So Vasuji's, the rickshaw is a ubiquitous presence in all his works. It is there as a cropped image, or it is there in its totality, and this, all these beautiful faces and profile and otherwise, and trees, this whole ecosystem, the biodiversity that it occupies and also encompasses. So I asked him why Vriksha. And he said when he was a youngster, he was inspired by Benre's poem, Kalpa-Vriksha Vrindavanam, which we later found out is a lament to his dead wife also. And he said, I from then on, I'm just, so I said, could I have that? So it was in Kannada. And as you know, Bendre is a modern day mystic. And there are the subtext and the layers in his writing. So we requested Basrur Subrao, an uncle of mine. He did 4 translations before he said, maybe this one will work because Bendre is just keeping me awake at night. And then we ran it by Vasuji and he said, yes, this works. And that's how it started, the whole process. So even if you see, it's the site-specific work because I don't think a proscenium would do justice to Vasuji's imagination in a sense. It was, and so we used this space. We will watch a small clip from there. Bendre's Vrindavan is this space. And it is again about lost love. It's about the promise of finding love and hope. And the second part was his more recent works, the series called Rhapsody, which again I asked him, which wasn't really inspired by text, so he was experimenting. It was his form taking, evolving into different directions. And I asked him, Vasuji, which is your, he listens to music when he paints. Right, Vasuji? So I asked him, what is your favorite rag? He said, Jinjoti. So we asked Praveen D. Rao, who did the musicscape, to create a tarana using funk, jazz, and Hindustani music. And I choreographed to that the movement of Kathak. The hand gestures turn into paintbrushes for this particular piece. And it was done in the water body and over it. And we did a mapping for the first time on the building there. And that's how Kalpavriksha was born.
How do you, I have a sense of how a painting gets done, but how do you choreograph a dance? Where does it start? Kalpavriksha you can use as an example, but, and this is what gave me the idea to ask the question. So clearly, did it start with the hand gesture? Does it start with an imagery? Does it start with structure of the body? Where does it start?
If you look at the codification in the book on dramaturgy, it starts with the hand. Yato hasta tatho drishti, yatho drishti, tatho manaha, tatho, rasa, yatho rasa, tatho bhava, So that's what they say. That's the transition from the hand to the eye to the feeling, and finally the transference onto an audience. And in Indian dance, we call the audience a sahriday, which is a co-empath. So we travel together. But I think for me, like I said earlier, it's a womb memory. Apparently by the time I was 2.5, I could say complicated rhythm patterns. I could fall asleep next to a tabla, playing through the night. So growing up in green rooms, I have also watched my mother, who was very influenced by literature. She experimented with various themes, but she experimented within the periphery of Kathak. Whereas for me, I think for her it has been content, for me it has been the form itself. So I'm interested in the various textures that one can experiment with. And I always have a grid in mind. I have a very sort of visual persona. And but when I go into the studio and have a dancer, some of my dancers are sitting here, they'll tell you, something happens and everything else goes out the window and we choreograph on the spot. And I choreograph on a dancer's body also. So, which is why for me it's very difficult to choreograph on myself. I'm usually the outside eye working with them. So it could be an idea. For example, let me give you an idea. That you will see it later. Maybe after this we'll play Kalpavriksha so that it's fresh in your mind. There is a piece on the mystics of Karnataka, the Sharnes. And for me, it was like, you're constantly hearing vachanas, if you're born in, blaring out of microphones also. And I said, I didn't want to do this, but there was a conference called Mad and Divine. And we had to do the works of women mystics across India. Lal Ded was taken. Mirabai was taken. So Janabai was taken. So I went to my uncle and he said, why are you not doing the Sharnes of Karnataka? And heard that and immediately thought of this is salvation through disappearance. How does one show disappearance on stage? And you will see a part of it. So you take the audience into this journey where they also feel this saturation so that they're a germination ground for much more. I'm sorry, I think I've gone off tangent, but yeah, basically that's how I choreograph. I'm propelled by an idea, a piece of music, a painting, but the choreography, my canvas really is the stage.
Do you want to show it now? Or?
We could show a little bit of Kalpavriksha. That was Kalpavriksha and Rhapsody. And, you know, before we go on, I think this was supposed to be a conversation. Very conveniently, somewhere along the way, Shoba said, I'm a moderator, I'm going to interview you or something. So I'm going to ask Shoba something, since we are today talking about the cross-illumination between thoughts, ideologies, and the arts. Shoba, how do you choose your themes? It's so varied. First of all, your column, as you know, you're a social commentator, you're a storyteller. You have written books from Food and Faith to Cows of Bangalore to the monsoons. It's right. How do you choose your themes?
So, I think the themes come to you if you are lucky. Otherwise, you search for them. So when you look at the surface area of ideas, there are pretty much three ways that a story can germinate. I think this is across disciplines. Either it's given to you as a commission, or it comes to you as a gift, or you search for it. So those are the three ways. As a journalist, I search for it. I sought out Vasuji. I sought you out to write about dance. And journalism takes a different skill set. You have to hustle a bit. You have to seek the idea. You have to chase the idea. So it's a very different mindset. In literature, I'm reading a lot of poetry these days because my dad loved poetry after he passed away. In literature, I think it's a very different process because you have to have humility, you have to have the listening skill, you can't impose the weight, some of it. So there was a study done by the New York Times which talked about the muse, because in literature the muse is all important. So they did a study where they told two people to write on demand. So a deadline was given, a story idea, which is what is usually done. Okay, write a piece about, I don't know, a robbery that happened on the Upper West Side, or a town hall march that happened in Bangalore. Same idea is given. One person was allowed to wait for the muse to come and then write the story. The other person was told to write it on demand. And the New York Times, conveniently for them, said that there was no difference between the idea that you produce on demand versus the muse. So as journalism students, we were told there's no such thing as a muse. You write and it better be good. With literature, with the arts, with painting, I think once you are disciplined, you don't wait for the muse. You listen in a different way, you go through your day in a different way, and then you sit at the table and you write. So how did the Cows of Bangalore came to me from my milk lady who was selling me milk, and she said, Amma, I need to buy a cow, will you loan me 70,000 rupees? That was the start. I said, if I'm going to loan you money, I'm going to come with you to buy the cow. So that is how. With Food and Faith, I pitched it to my editor-in-chief in Delhi, Sukumar, and I said, I want to write about religion in a way that, as a skeptic, as somebody who's a seeker, who has a lot of problems with the patriarchy inherent in all faiths. So I want to write it as a skeptic seeker, and that was how that came about. My first book, Monsoon Diary, came out of a 150-word essay. As a young student, there was a competition. Again, at that time I lived in New York. The New York Times had a competition saying, write a 150-word essay about a food piece, and then if you win it, you will get $1,000 to dine at any establishment in New York. So I discovered that writing a 150-word essay is harder than writing. My columns are usually 800 words, and a book is 60,000 words. 150 words is not easy to do. It's like poetry, and poetry is not easy. So that book that got selected by the dining in restaurant critic of the Times, which ended up as a book. So for me, all 6 of my books in a way are memoir. Memoir is about memory, which is going to lead up to your question, by the way. Memoir is about memory. It's about how you think, how you go back in time, how you bring it forth. Dance does it very well, painting does it very well. It's about metaphor, it's about symbols. I would argue that as a journalist, journalism is a very poor way of communicating aesthetics and matters of the soul to people.
Before I answer your question, I just realized that we have somebody who danced in that 1994 work with Vasuji's paintings, and that's Vinita Malpani sitting over there. It was her group, she's Sangeeta, and some wonderful women who, wanted to. She was there, Vasuji, in your our first collaboration way back in '94. So, Shoba, yes. I'm sorry I deviated for a minute, but yes, to go back to what Shoba is saying about the metaphor. I think all of us artists have one connection to an idea or image, word that we are trying to portray as, and also as communicators. First is this, our sort of reaction and response to that idea. And then the second is being performing artists, visual artists, writers, to communicate it further. And I think that's where that's the difficult part, because you feel it, but how do you express then? So, and also how do you get the others to experience it? And I think that with contemporary writing, contemporary art and dance, I think we are asking audiences to look at things through the lens of their experiences. Rather than, codified dance forms where you can look at somebody's Aramandi and say she's a bad dancer. Or she didn't do this Kshetriya's Padam in the right way, or ye ghazal theek se nahi kiya, uski pronunciation galat hai. Whereas contemporary dance allows you to experience things in your own way. But when I go back to learning from my mother, she studied Abhinay from the Abhinay Chakravarti of India, which is Shambhu Maharaj of the Lucknow Gharana. And she said when she went to him and she said, he said, kya seekhna hai? So she said, Abhinay. So he said, beta taliyan nahi milengi. People are not going to give you ready applause. But with him, she found how the associated meaning is what is, why would you, that's my mother in her late 20s with a 19-inch waist. Again, inspired by literature, Shoba. She was the first one to do Ashtapadis in Kathak. So this is a 1956 or 57 piece. So she would, when she would teach us, if you don't mind, Shoba, if you can hold this. If she would say that if you have to talk about Krishna, it's not always the flute. So Krishna is also Sham, which is the dark clouds. It could also be the kajal in a naika's eyes. So this could be the clouds. It doesn't have to be this. Ab ke savan ghara, there's a tumri that quite a few of you have seen, which literally means this season of the savan, come home. But does savan always have to be rain and ghar have to be a place? Can savan be the tears of the naika and can the ghar be her heart? Can savan be the mehendi that has not caught color yet because she knows is not going to come? And the savan can then be that water that destroys that, chemical reaction that would have happened. So, or the lotus opening up to the moon to show separation. So the associated meaning has been there in these forms earlier, but I think somewhere along the way, I also feel with the recreation, thank you, the recreation of the Indian identity post-independence, I think a lot had to be made very literal. I'm talking about the classical forms. So yes, the metaphor is always there. As you saw over here also with the Kalpavriksha, it is a resonance of what one saw from the paintings and some forms that you pick up. And for the audience also this was an aerial view of Rhapsody at NGME.
So if I can add to this, Madhu, for anyone who wants to be a writer, one book series that I always recommend is the Paris Review interviews, which are interviews with poets, novelists across time. And a great piece of advice that young writers express in words the tip of the iceberg and evoke or invoke the feeling of the vastness underneath. Wordplay does that, and India does it especially well because we are an emotive culture. Abhinaya, I've looked, Madhu, and correct me if I'm wrong, I have seen no dance, kabuki, I know ballet. Use of the eyes, use of the face is so limited in non-Indian work. Is that true?
Yeah, that is true.
They use the body, but they don't use the face so much.
Or they use the concept of stillness, like you spoke about, no, right? And the shamanistic forms would do that. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. And in fact, if we go back a few centuries, George Noverre, whose birthday is the 29th of April, which is World Dance Day, wrote 5 principles. Because at that time, moving before the imperial age also of ballet, you're in the courts of Louis XIV, and he's a Frenchman. He's the Sun King. And so he and his the aristocrats dance in the palace. So it's a palace dance, a social dance that gets transferred to the proscenium when he opens the Paris Opera House. And then a dance form evolves. The ballet masters come in, the point is created, the tutus, etc. So he actually creates 5 principles, which is that the first is that the corps de ballet also has to be involved. It can't be just about the ballerina and everybody's at the back. 2, that the use of, as he is doing beautifully, the use of mime, which is actually abhinay in a sense, the expressive mode, and 3rd is not to use already existing symphonies, but to actually create pieces for a ballet. So that's how Tchaikovsky and others are commissioned to do work. Similarly for set design, and how the plot has to run through instead of just being about the virtuoso quality of 31 pirouettes or whatever else. So they also realize that, but it is sort of compared to the vastness, the spectrum of abhinay in India, definitely it does fall short. It's like Shiba, since you write so much about food, it's like the Indian palate, right? We are exposed to so much, so it's almost the same.
Yeah. So I did an article about what is the national food of India, and I asked the chefs from across the country, and it was very interesting how the answers are very different. One said dal chawal, the other said a thali, because we are a thali country, and the other one said a chaat. So anyway, I wanted to ask Madhu about resilience. And this is true of artists like Vasudev ji as well, is that how do you persist? I think being an artist anywhere in the world is about persistence and resilience. So as a dancer, how do you do that? How does a dancer?
I remember as a young girl, since I was born in a family of artists, my father was a wonderful musician plus impresario, and my mother, of course, was a famous dancer. So great musicians, artists, everybody would come home, and they would all say to me, "You're going to be a dancer, right? It's in your blood." And I was a very independent, defiant teenager, and who didn't want to do what my parents were doing, so I ran away from it. And I would always say that I will support dance from the outside. I'll become a journalist. We have some wonderful writers, pardon me, but I actually thought I could be one. Or I'll write about it, or I'll sponsor it. And it was all set to do my CAT exams. When I encountered a workshop in Delhi, we won't talk about it, it's too long. But I remember I ran across from Triveni Kala Sangam in Delhi to Bengali market, and you had to make trunk bookings then, 1990. And I said to my mother, I called her up here in Bangalore, and I said, "Can I join your choreography institute?" She said, "What happened?" I said, "No, I want to be a dancer." She said, "You have 2 months to finish your commerce degree, finish it. Take on dance only if you can choose creative satisfaction over monetary benefits. Are you ready to do that? Then do it. Because this is a difficult path. It's for the brave. And it also means finances. All your friends are going to be CEOs, CFOs, etc. Are you ready?" And I was. Which is why you will not find me sitting in an international panel and complain about lack of funding in India, which is almost negligible. But creating opportunities. That's what we have always done. I was also a product of the time of privatization in India. So we did not have to have government patronage. We moved to other sources. All our dancers, we have dancers who have left their professions as chartered accountants and whatever else, and they only dance. That is only the monetary part, Shobha. I think for dance, I know that dance has healed me, you know. There are my most difficult journeys, and you leave your chappals behind and you enter the studio. And because somatic immersion, somatic engagement puts you in the present moment like nothing else can. And that's a moment of fearlessness. It's a moment that propels creativity. Of course, sharpens your cognition and everything. And you are just this one stack, body, mind, and spirit. But that also takes a toll on us. I'll tell you why. When you go on stage, and the equation is that you have to perform, you know, the best possible manner. Nobody cares if someone died in your family. You have a migraine that night, you had a breakup or whatever. And that takes a toll because all the time you're saying to everybody, and everyone's telling you as artists, the show must go on. So recently I've started to question myself and say, what if the show doesn't go on? You know, somebody else will take it on. Maybe not as well as you want it to be, but they can do it. And I think we artists also need to learn to do that, because I think it was Elizabeth Gilbert's talk about artists and depression. She's saying, have you heard someone, maybe not in today's time, but those days, like somebody saying, hey, how is your friend who's the mechanic doing? Is his depression okay? You know, whereas some other artists would have just jumped from somewhere, or, you know, and I remember some artists, I forget the poet who said that every piece of writing kills me. Like that. Maybe. And also I remember our gurus would tell us that, especially in Hindustani music and Kathak, this concept of dard, pain. And when you listen to, for example, Begum Akhtar or Girja Devi, unki awaaz mein dard hai. Because they have experienced it all. Because you talk about sanyog or viyog, separation and union, you have to experience it. So this pain, I think, also drives us and also makes us resilient. And each of us artists, whether we are writers, we are painters, we are dancers, musicians, we're also seed receptacles of various realities, historical, geopolitical, and today, of course, climate.
We can talk about climate change, which both of us believe is gender and climate change are the topics for the future, but I'm also aware of time, and I was told that we stop for Q&A for 10 minutes at 7:30. I wish Vasuji had been on this stage, because I would love to talk to you about art and how dance is connected as well. But in closing, I want to say that India epitomizes this spirit that Madhu talked about, the collaboration. I was doing some research about, is there an obvious connection between writing and art? And I came upon Chitrakavya, a Sanskrit type of poetry, where literally the kavya or the poem is written in drawing and painting. So we have that. And I, like Harish mentioned and like Vasuji was saying, I consider dance one of the most beautiful art forms that we have. And its transience is its nobility and meanings. So we will, shall we talk?
So Shobha, just there were a couple of montages, because Vasuji was keen that we also show some of the works we're talking about. So Rupa, maybe since we're talking about literature and dance, and Prasanna ji is sitting here in the audience. So we had done a collaboration with him where we looked at the Ramayanas from across 12 different countries, and in India also, how the retelling, you know, whether it's Kamban Ramayana, it's the Odia Ramayana, it's the Tulsi Ramayana, etc. happens. So maybe, Shobha, yeah. So maybe we can show a little bit of that. That was a piece we used also about 10 different dance forms from India. This particular one was done in Thailand recently for the Ratnakosin dynasty, who believe they are descendants of Ram. And so it travels from, and if you look at any of our works, our music is music, the multimedia, Costuming is all commissioned. We never dance to pre-recorded music. So the music doesn't dictate, it meets us halfway. If you look at this starts with imagery from India and then moves on to the Southeast Asian ones. Rupa, you can just show us some images, maybe? Yes, yes, definitely. Yeah, so I'll just wait. Rupa, play whatever you're playing and I will talk about it. We'll do it that way. Yeah. This is a piece where I'll, Rupa, if you can just stop it for a second, I'll go there. Yeah. So this is a piece, again, that was, I did for the Mad and Divine conference. And this is revisiting the Sharanes of the 12th century. We all hear of Akka Mahadevi. We had 35 other such women. They were not all Vairagis. They were, Basavarna's wife or whoever else, and, beautiful, independent thinking women. And it's salvation through disappearance. They literally go into a cave and disappear. It's like a beam me up, Scotty, okay, from the started days. So I collaborated with a very dear friend, Ramya Reddy, a photo artist, and she created this concept of the threshold, which is between life and death. And also the state of horripilation that Ramakrishna Paramahamsa talks about, you were talking about, that moment of knowing. The Sharanes did not believe in afterbirth, afterlife. They did not believe in karma. And it's called Like Camphor on Fire. In fact, again, even for the launch, we had M.D. Pallavi singing and Sandhya Mendonça talking about it. So we always, even in a, like today, always collaborate, so with different fields. So I would like you to imagine the cacophony of life if you just step outside map. And from there, how these words transform you. The metaphorical imagery that she talks about, although I will be doing it in the Kathak style, I would like you to experience it in your own way.
How do you merge with what you cannot see? How do you create form out of the formless? How do you listen to that which does not speak? It cannot be caught. It cannot be spoken to. It does not have a body. It is not inside this or outside that. It is beyond speech, mind, and thought. Yet it resides within you, of its own accord. Not knowing you are it, you search for something outside, something separate.
Just used one hasta, despite having 54 hastas in Indian dance, and especially Kathakali has 500 odd, and that was the Sarpashirsha only to convey an idea. Can we see, I think we'll end quickly. I think we'll move to Palimpsest. This is a piece we created again with a company, an organization called Jaga. We all know Jaga. arts intervention in public spaces. And this one was on climate change and climate action. Transcontinental collaborators from the field, not only of design and art, but VR, AI, and this had many artists, AI artists. You had also Jiayu Lee, who has done the other piece. Do we have a small clip, Rupa? So this particular piece also had, apart from like visual artists and designers, there was one piece, Shobha, just to talk about how this whole spatio-temporal element, which was about climate refugees. And, you know, it was the idea came to my mind because I was reading an article which said that 40% of the children in government schools speak Bengali, they can't understand Kannada medium. And this about this refugee who's saying that, you know, you don't know the indignity of being a refugee. Do you know what starvation feels like? And, you know, wherever we go, we're unwelcome. And these are climate refugees fleeing the rising levels of water, the Brahmaputra. And so instead of again doing another, so there was a piece on water that you saw where the Jiayu Lee, the artist from Beijing and UK, has created imagery after watching the dancers, and it is at how water molecules would move in reaction to. So it was a beautiful installation. So the climate refugee part, I called up Parvati Ball, who's a dear friend, and I asked her, do you have some piece of music on, or lyrics on leaving your homeland behind? She said, yes, a beautiful piece that my grandmother would sing when she left East Pakistan, Bangladesh now. And so we had MD Pallavi sing it and also do a mono act about this whole concept of displacement. So I think as a dancer, I feel sort of incomplete unless there are these other elements, and we're constantly, from painting to AI to literature, that we are constantly seeking connections.
Time for questions. I can keep asking her, but if you have any, I think you have two artists, one who is rooted in community and has preserved his own art form at a very high level, and similarly a dancer, also rooted in collaboration and community, and also questioning constantly. So if you have questions about creation, about generation, anything at all. 10 minutes, we said, yeah.
I have a question for you. Since you like to work in collaboration, now I think that dance is actually only one aspect. Art is a representation of life around one. So unless all the elements are present, it cannot be complete. Otherwise, it's just a mechanical exercise, we are doing something. But if you want to express emotions, would it be like that? So I thought, you talked about collaboration, but isn't that a very natural way? In fact, even in the very mechanical structure where the grammar is being taught, there's also music, there's also rhythm, there's so many other things that come together. And but that's only the structure and the grammar being taught. The moment it moves above that, it has to have all these elements.
Yes, Chandradi, because I think we are becoming more and more binary as we go along, right? We are no longer analog. If you looked at the Natya Shastra itself, it's a treatise on dramaturgy, but it has a chapter on the architecture of that period of the stage house, the playhouse. It talks about music, it talks about psychology. So if you have the Ashtanayikas, the 8 heroines, you also have the Ashtarasas. The Navrasa comes much later. It's the Ashtarasas. And 54 psychological stages connected to it. So you had to be a bit of an actor in order to be a dancer. And of course, you had to know music. And if you also looked at the older generation of artists like Girja Devi, others, they're almost dancing on stage when they're doing a thumri. But as Shoba said, as nowadays we are living in silos, and that is true of 80%, I can speak for the dance world, because nowadays dancers have to adhere to a certain aesthetic, a certain optic, and it's gotten worse with the pandemic. So you find a lot of the younger generation, and maybe a generation before that, shopping for pieces, And so you are getting ready-made pieces. We're always dancing to recorded music. Very few people even come in. We dance in dance festivals. We are the only ones who come 5 hours before and set up stage, absorb the atmosphere. People just come, dance and get out. They have a lighting person, they have the person playing sound, dance out. There is no engagement. So I think that's why Shobha was talking about how we are going into our silos. And even for artists, the artist community here, you only see Vasuji coming to most shows for dancers, for music shows. Similarly for dance, how many dancers are going to watch to an art gallery? This is a reality. People are not watching, because I remember Chandralekha saying to me once, she said, education is one thing, but inspiration, quite another. And I think that needs to happen. That's why this talk about cross-illumination and collaboration, very few of us are doing it now.
Just one comment. Sorry. See, Madhu is we talked about art and literature and dance, but my collaboration with her led to history.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
I think she has a unique ability to understand complex people like Professor Shetter, who was running that travel of ideas through Ramayana, that seminar which was in memory of my father. And she was able to, like a sponge, listen to him, understand what is there in the whole seminar of 2 days, and come up with a creation which was a history of Ramayana. And it was so well done in wonderful forms in different parvas and the like. And later I thought I will commission something on history with her. But when I went to Chodaya to see the history of Kathak she has created, I think she's as good.
That's our guru who created that. I just assisted.
But she's as good a cinematographer. She has created cinema there. So, and similarly, when I saw her portrayal of Akamaha Devi, which she had taken to US, and I don't recall, but I think a nude scene had to be created in dance. And the way she created that, I think, is wonderful. So how do you transcend and abstract on all these things? Madhu, can you share with us?
I'll have to keep it a little short, I think, because of the time. So, just an idea, if you looked at that visual of the unity of space and time that we have in Indian dance, where you're looking, you're getting hit by these visuals of everyday life, the cacophony of modern day living, and you have to go back 800 years to the Sharanes. So my friend and I said, how do we show disappearance? So he said, why can't we dissolve in it? And that's why this water body starts to cover. And today, of course, we have a different kind of projector, but we use two projectors, one as a back thing, LED, and one from the front that hits me. So you actually become part of that and actually disappear like camphor on fire. So using modern day technology, but an idea which is so primordial. So I think things like this, we kind of start to create our own devices as artists to do that. And I think all arts transcend all these barriers, whether they're geographical, racial, or political. So I think transcendence is definitely a sort of a wave we have to ride as artists.
One more question. Actually, between them, they kind of asked what I wanted to, so let's go to somebody else. Okay, shall I just go ahead then? This is actually more for Vasu. Vasu, taking off on what they have been talking about, how, okay, is it not on? But I'm quite audible. Okay, yeah. So, why aren't enough artists of different disciplines open to collaboration? The time that you were working with the Karnads and the other different poets and things was so creative. All of you were so creative because you kind of shared your ideas. What is preventing others, except honorable exceptions like Madhu and Pallavi? Why are other artists hesitant?
It's very difficult to say that because I, for one, I was interested in different arts from the beginning. And fortunately, the place I lived in Cholamandal, artist village in Chennai, we used to have regularly dancers, musicians, literary people coming there and coming and performing on our stage for no cost, nothing. So that made me realize that it is important for us to collaborate. And my interest in these things, particularly, one of my old friends, Girish Karnad, who is not here anymore, he inspired me a lot. And it is through him I saw a lot of things. And particularly the Kalpavriksha, which was shown here, I reacted to Bendre's poetry in Dharwar when I had my exhibition. Bendre came to my exhibition. And so it is a sort of a, many people ask me nowadays, how is it at that point of time you knew so many of people like P.V. Karant or Anantamurthy and Karnad and others? It's a question of just opening yourself. Opening yourself. And I think it's possible for anybody to open oneself and do it. And it's a good thing that today we have got Madhu to come and perform and also show whatever she's doing. And I personally feel that it's important for us to have literary people, poets and others to come and perform, say things, what they have to say. And it's important, I think, for anyone to collaborate. I collaborate with poets, I collaborate with dancers, I collaborate with musicians. So it's nice. The life is very, very interesting, that way. Yeah. Why should you be scooped in in your own art, which is always there, we can always do it. Yeah. I don't know whether I have answered your question, but that's what I feel.
Thank you. You have.
So you've got to hear two
please. Thank you, Madhu. Thank you, Shoba. I've known Madhu for, I think, from my first dance performance, about that long. And it's always inspiring for me to see what new chapters Madhu's writing and the story and the point she made about collaboration. I think Charles Darwin said, in the evolution of humankind, only those species that collaborated have survived. And I don't think we need to wait for that. Around us, there are enough examples of even politicians are collaborating to survive. So I think we can all learn from the fact that great work comes when people collaborate. And I hope what Madhu said resonated amongst all of us and we take the message out. And thank you, Mr. Vasudev, for Ananya Drisha, which is getting artists from different fields to collaborate. And Sandhya, maybe this will start a wave of people coming together to create new pieces of art. So thank you, Madhu, thank you, Shoba, and thank you, Santosh, for the ISL interpretation. Have a good evening, everybody.